things being equal, the merger between Sahel Sahara and OmniBank is expected to be completed by October 18 this year with a full 400 million cedi minimum capital requirement. This comes after the Bank of Ghana last month approved the proposed merger of the two banks with a caution that the final approval will only be considered after all the necessary documentation has been submitted for review. Even though the central bank is said to have given the two banks up to the end of December this year to submit all the necessary documentation on the measure and also meet the minimum capital requirement, the banks are optimistic that they will meet the regulator's requirement 2 clear months ahead of schedule. Northern Akwa Hayford is with Joy Business and he's here to help us understand this. Now, Northern, we know that in 2017, after the collapse of UT and Capital banks, there was recommendation by the Bank of Ghana for some banks to merge, even as they, raised the capital requirement and also try to sanitize the banking sector. Is that the result of what we are seeing today?
Obviously, that is what we are seeing today. You recall that when that announcement was made after this collapse, and then they asked them to look at if you can't meet the minimum capital requirement, that's the new one, 400 million Ghana cedis, why not? Let's think of mergers and acquisitions. And well, there's been a lot of talk within the industry with regards to that. You've had some of the foreign-owned banks even talk about the fact that, they are looking to see if they could acquire one or two of the banks, because if you have over 30 banks, some have said that is too much for the kind of economy that we have. They think that you have a very small economy. If you compare Ghana to Nigeria, if you look at how huge they are, how many banks we have in Nigeria? Probably around 9 maximum. That is what they may have. It could be less than that. And so we need to be able to have bigger banks in terms of capital base to engage in the big ticketing transactions that we see, like the cocoa syndicated loan. How many of our local banks are able to play a role in that? And so it's important that you have bigger banks, and that's the reason why the central bank increased the minimum capital requirement, and these talks have been going on, and that's what we see today, where you have OmniBank and Sahel Sahara, coming together to become one bank.
Now let's be clear on this. Sahel Sahara, we know that Omni is a Ghanaian-owned bank, but with Sahel Sahara, can you give us a bit of background and education to this bank and how it was formed and all that?
Okay, so if you look at the Sahel Sahara Bank, you might say that it belongs to the BSIC group, and this is a group that is headquartered in Cameroon at the moment. That is after Libya had its own whatever, and we know that the late head or ruler of Libya, that is Gaddafi, was the one who decided to set up this bank. He was looking to have a bigger African bank. But what was the motive behind it? The whole plan was, instead of African countries going out there to look for aid and loans and all that, why don't we have one bigger bank here that can take care of what you do? So he set out to put this bank together. He invested 500 million euros. And initially, it started in 14 countries, which Ghana was one of them. And this is way back, I think, 2006, 2007. Actually, the president of Ghana today, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, was then the foreign minister when this happened. And he was the one who signed the agreement together with his senior minister, Osafo Mafo. They signed the agreement for the Ghana's portion of this 500 million that was used in setting up this bank. And the vision for it is this bank becomes a local bank. Whatever profits that you make after the initial investment they had made, whatever profits that you make, that is not repatriated to the group or to Libya, but you reinvest that in your economy. So as we speak today, Sahel Sahara was incorporated in Ghana and began business somewhere on the 25th of March 2008, does not pay taxes, because whatever that they do, when they declare profits, it's to the government. The dividends are given to the government. Yeah.
Now let's come to the merger proper now. So what are we likely to see? Recently we saw a merger of two telcos, that Airtel and Tigo, and we saw the name Airtel Tigo. It may be early days yet, but what are we likely to see? Are we likely to see them merge and maybe operate under their names as it is, or we're going to see a new bank altogether? What are we likely to see?
Oh, well, obviously, when two companies come together and then they merge, at some point there's what you call the rebranding. There's a new name that will come out. What we are picking is, if all things being equal, they may call the new entity Sahel. Okay. We don't know. If nothing changes, that might be the name they will come with. And what is happening now is, how do they meet the minimum capital requirement? Interestingly, Sahel has been able to get the group to look for funding. And so as of last week, they got $60 million. And so they are short of $25 million, which will then help them to be able to meet the 400 million Ghana cedis that we are talking about. We understand that probably by the close of this month, that funding will also come in, and the new entity will be able to meet the minimum capital
we don't know if Omni is bringing any to supplement or support it. Since they're becoming one entity, it will definitely be 400 for the
Exactly. I want to believe that Omni and the owners of, or the shareholders and directors of the bank are also trying to pull strings to see what they can also bring on board to support, to ensure that they meet the minimum capital requirement. Don't forget that we have December for all banks in this country to meet the minimum capital requirement. Yeah.
All right. For some, this has been long coming. For some, I know that sometimes the banking experts have argued that some of these banks may want to try to raise the capital on their own. But clearly with this measure, we are seeing that it may be impossible for single banks to raise those loans, so they need to merge. Are we picking up any indication of other measures?
Yes, you know that before Sahel decided to merge with Omni, there was an initial agreement with GN Bank and Premium Bank. So we're supposed to have three banks come together and then, become one entity. But at some point, I think that in their negotiations, talks and all that, Sahel decided to pull out. And so they pulled out and went to Omni. Great. Now, we know that as of last week, Friday, GN and Premium had been able to rope in Heritage Bank and had sent a letter to the central bank asking that they approve, for them to be able to also merge to become one entity. And so what is happening at the moment is that we are waiting for that initial no objection approval from the central bank to these three entities.
That's GN, Heritage, and
Premium banks to become one entity.
Thank you very much, Novan. Really great getting all the details from you. We'll bring you everything you need to know about what's currently happening in the banking sector.